Hi there, I'm Phil, and welcome to another of my story analysis videos, where I take a look at a film in terms of its story structure, character arcs and themes. Today, we're looking at AFTERSUN. Make sure you've seen the film, spoilers ahead. AFTERSUN was released in 2022, starring Paul Mescal and Frankie Corio, and directed by Charlotte Wells, her first feature film. And this is different to the films I usually look at here. This does not follow a 3-act structure. In fact, it doesn't really have any structure at all. And that's kind of the point.
In the early stages, it began as a bit more of a conventionally structured piece about these two people who go on holiday in this very kind of confined resort area and then find reason to leave it and kind of explore the place that they are. But I think over the course of writing, it just became a bit more personal. Like, it began to be more informed by specific memories, not from a holiday, but kind of from throughout childhood, and I allowed that to form the outline kind of the script.
So, in discussing structure for this film, we're really looking at anti-structure. And the best version of anti-structure as a structure is what we call the carrier bag theory. This comes primarily from Ursula LeGuin, the fantasy and science fiction author, famous for books like The Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed, although she gets it from Elizabeth Fisher originally. It's basically an anti-hero's journey story. She outlines all of this in a very good article which I'll link to below. This reads in part, "One relationship among elements in the novel may well be that of conflict, but the reduction of narrative to conflict is absurd. Conflict, competition, stress, struggle, etc., within the narrative conceived as carrier bag, belly, box, house, medicine bundle, may be seen as necessary elements of a whole, which itself cannot be characterized either as conflict or as harmony, since its purpose is neither resolution nor stasis, but continuing process."
When you were 11, what did you think you would be doing now?
Where we have the hero's journey, and 3-act structure is a version of that essentially, which is a masculine story. It's about going out and winning the battle. There's an antagonist, or there's a problem in the world that must be solved, and there's a resolution to the story once the problem is solved or not. And there are beats to that arc, to that story. There are critical turning points, which I've discussed in my other videos, the inciting incident, the first act turning point, the midpoint, etc. These all become critical turning points in the plot and critical choice moments for your central character, your hero. But although we prefer the term protagonist these days, of course. But your classic hero's journey is about a hero overcoming odds, fighting battles, saving the princess, defeating the dragon, all of that kind of stuff. The carrier bag theory is the opposite of that. It's a more feminine approach to storytelling. It's not about the hunter, it's about the gatherer. It's about the little daily things that we do to sustain ourselves. It's not about the big drama and the big crisis and the great epic story. It's about the minutiae of day-to-day living.
Why don't you go over and introduce yourself?
Dad, no, they're like kids.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go over and introduce yourself?
Sophie, they're like old.
If you've seen any of my other story analysis videos, you know I often talk about A plot and B plot. The A plot is the stuff that happens. The plot, right? The problem that has to be solved. The B plot is about the character journey and the central relationship of the story, which is what your story is really about. Now that can be flipped in something like a rom-com, or something that tends to be more character-driven, where there is less plot and more character journey and character moments. The carrier bag theory is where it goes all the way to character-driven, and there's pretty much no plot whatsoever. This is very hard to do in film, because we expect to see problems being solved. We expect to see riddles and questions posed that are then provided with answers. You get this in novels, especially literary novels, more than you do in commercial fiction. And Ursula K. LeGuin was kind of straddling both of that. She's a science fiction author, but she's also writing what some would argue are very literary books. These are much more character-driven stories. AFTERSUN is a very character-driven story. It has no plot. It doesn't have these major story beats. The only plot we have, to the extent that we have one, is a father and a daughter go on a holiday in Turkey. They arrive, and at the end, they leave.
Hang tight, Pop, okay?
Okay. I'm fine.
In terms of plot, that's it. And there's also a bit of non-linear in this, where we jump occasionally forwards to the adult version of Sophie, as she reflects on this particular memory of the holiday with her dad. So structurally, the carrier bag here is in fact the framing device of older Sophie, remembering this holiday with her father.
Happy birthday, Sophie.
And the items within that bag are all the memories. That's it. There is no plot beyond that. The people they meet, like the teenagers,
Do you want a game of doubles?
Yeah, sure.
or young Michael,
I quite like you. Do you like me?
Yes.
stuff happens, but there's no real conflict there. So, what is there to sustain our interest, you might ask? Well, that's it. It's the little moments that build a greater understanding of human behaviour and the nature of a relationship between two people.
I just want you to promise me that you'll talk to me about it, okay?
Okay, but I'm never gonna do any of that anyway.
That's okay too. But if you do, remember, okay?
To this extent, Charlotte Wells deliberately does not answer questions for us. And in fact, the major problem of the film is what the father is emotionally and psychologically going through off screen, outside of the relationship with his daughter. Now, we do get a few scenes that show this, where he's alone. But most of the film is him with the daughter trying to hide this depression, these anxieties that he has.
When you were 11, what did you think you would be doing now? Hello? What did you think you would be doing now?
Well, so turn it off now, okay?
We don't really know our parents until we gain a little perspective, and I think, if nothing else, that's a massive success for the film, in my opinion.
And Charlotte Wells, the writer and director of this, doesn't point it out. There is no voiceover, there is no conversation with a friend that explains how he's feeling or what he's thinking about. You've got to work it out for yourself as an audience member. And she makes a point of not spelling it out.
It's always a fine line between giving yourself enough, like what is the minimum in some ways, but having more than you need, just a little more than you need to shoot with. But I'm also very determined not to shoot what I don't want in the film. So we didn't shoot anything that offered the type of clarity that some people might have been more inclined toward, because we didn't want to have to use it.
I don't like telling people what to feel about it, so I just, please go see our movie.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the main thing.
Another distinctive feature of this film is the cinema verite style of cinematography. It feels like we're just observing this father and daughter living their life. It feels like a documentary. That said, there are some shots that hang longer than they should, that are from an angle or a perspective that is rather unusual. It's not your standard coverage cinematography.
What did you do for your 11th birthday?
And this gives you a sense of unease, as well as giving you a sense of being in the moment with the characters. In fact, the characters have a handy cam with them, a camcorder. This is 1997, is the period of the film. And there's several moments in the film where we see what they're shooting with their own camcorder. So it's almost found footage in parts.
The most amazing thing in my whole entire life.
That very naturalistic approach to the cinematography and the way it's edited and the use of the music. All of this is very carefully planned, and there was a script for this film that went through several drafts. Pretty much all the dialogue in the film is scripted. It's written down, though it doesn't feel like it. It feels incredibly natural.
We did 2 read-throughs of the script during the 2-week rehearsal period that we had. Just the 3 of us, Paul, Frankie, and myself. And we had a redacted version of the script, so it included only the scenes that Frankie was in and nothing of Callum's individual scenes. So Frankie never really had a sense of the struggle that Callum was having with his own mental health beyond her eye.
Making a film that feels this impulsive and this real is actually very hard to do. It takes a lot of craft. This becomes part of the carrier bag approach, especially to filmmaking. We are not giving you easy answers. It's not about defeating the villain or saving the girl. There is no end goal in sight here. Here, the journey is the thing. Now, there is another similar structure, Picaresque, which is a kind of balance between plot and character-driven stories. In a Picaresque film, I discussed this briefly in my Wes Anderson video when I looked at The Darjeeling Limited. It's an excellent Picaresque structured film. There is a goal. There is an end point in sight. This is usually what you find in road movies of one sort or another. But it's fundamentally about the journey of getting there. The goal, ultimately, doesn't matter that much. It's the character relationships that develop along the journey and the people they meet along the way. That's kind of halfway between character-driven and plot-driven. The carrier bag approach to plot just takes away that goal completely.
But yeah, I think it became about memory. It could no longer, even though there were times it felt very tempting to revert back to that very straightforward holiday, when I was never sure if it would work. It was impossible because I didn't know how that film ended, because it had become so inextricably about, memory.
There is no great crisis. There is no great tension. Certainly there is no tension in the nature of the relationship here. So by the time we get to the end, it feels like nothing's happened.
I love you.
Love you.
Bye.
But of course, by the time we get to the end, you realize everything has happened. These films kind of sneak up on you. And AFTERSUN is the best example that I've seen to date of this kind of structure in cinema. Other films that do this tend to come from Europe or Asia. Chinese films, for example, or Korean films sometimes. Films that are very character-centric, where nothing much seems to happen, but everything is about the relationship and the journey. And when I say journey, it's not even about getting somewhere in particular. It's not about the goal at all. As Charlotte puts it, for AFTERSUN,
I think it became about memory.
So the reason I think this film has been so successful in film festivals and with an audience is that it's offering an alternative approach to storytelling, a much more humanistic, a much more feminine, female approach, a much more gatherer versus hunter approach to storytelling. And for those who are used to English language, American, English, Australian type films, we don't get that very often. There are exceptions, obviously. Nomadland is along these lines. The Australian film Samson and Delilah is along these lines. They're much more about these quiet, intimate moments of humanity. We're not dealing with big world-shattering issues. We're not trying to save the multiverse. So that's my take on AFTERSUN, something a bit different. If you like these kinds of videos, you know what to do. If you'd like to learn more about filmmaking, check out my book linked below. And also, if you'd like to support the channel and perhaps see some videos that I can't release on YouTube, maybe consider joining my Patreon. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
I'm still copying you though.
I know.
Exactly.
And now copy this.